welcome to the 5th edition of our GTS webinar series. Thanks for your company. Thanks for joining us again. Today he'll be speaking on power and resistance management, which from what I can see seems to be becoming a bigger problem every year. Talking to guys out in the field, you know, the herbicides they're using, they just don't seem to be getting the control, as they used to on the power. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and I think it's something certainly we need to discuss. So I'm sure there'll be some information in Jyri's presentation you might have heard before, but I'm very confident there'll be other information presented that I think you'll find fairly useful. So without further ado, I'll leave you in Jyri's capable hands. I'll hand over to him and he'll take it from here.
All right, thanks Paul, and good morning everyone. And I must say big thanks to Greenway Turf Solutions for these webinars. I think they're a great initiative. So yeah, what I wanted to talk about was power and resistance management. Obviously an increasing problem around the country, and it's I think good timing this time of the year and the season we've had around the country. There's been quite a bit of rainfall, so some good weed germinations, and yeah, there's definitely issues with regards to power management. So I'll just go over a bit of a resistance overview, look at the current herbicides, then really concentrate on talking about herbicide application, getting some things right about your herbicide application, and probably some bits of information that may be new to you. Talk about some herbicide programs. There's been quite an interesting paper put forward by a couple of American researchers on their thoughts on best to handle these POAs which have got quite widespread resistance to herbicides. So I'll just go through that. Then just wrap up with talk about resistance testing. That that can be done. So if you do have issues, samples can be sent away and tested for resistance. And then just a couple of resources at the end, which you might want to follow up on. All right, so there's a global database of herbicide resistance weeds, which you can look up on the internet. And I just pulled out Poa in turf, what's there at the moment. And this is just a small snapshot, but you can see it's a pretty widespread, across the world. We see it in Australia, Japan, in the United States. To get cases on this database, they have to be put in by scientists, by researchers. So not everything's on this database, and it's continually being updated, but just gives you a small snapshot and goes back quite a way, back into the 1980s when the first case of power resistance was documented in a turf situation. I'll just highlight case number 11 here down the bottom, second from the bottom. In this particular case, we see resistance to two different types of mode of action herbicides, the ALS inhibitors or the sulfonylureas, and to photosystem 2 herbicides, which are things like simazine. So we're not just seeing resistance to one type of herbicide in terms of mode of actions, but we're seeing multiple resistance. And recently, Dr. Peter Boutsalis from Adelaide has found power plants in Australia which are resistant to 5 different types of mode of action herbicides. So that's where our problems are really coming, and it seems to be an increasing trend that these particular biotypes which are resistant to multiple modes of action are increasing and occurring more. So why is Poa so herbicide resistant? I think this herbicide resistance does become so quickly resistant to herbicides and to multiple herbicides. Well, as you probably know, Poa is a hybrid plant originally, came from 2 different Poa species. And because of that, it is highly variable. So morphologically, when we look at Poa plants in the field, we see ones which are very fine leaf, we see ones which are coarse leaf, we see ones which are very tight, don't grow very tall at all, and then we see long lanky ones with long stems, long leaves. So quite a variety of characteristics in the Poa plants that occur. And as part of that variety, we then have differences in herbicide resistance as well. You know, the genetics of all these different varieties are different, and part of that, those differences are resistance to herbicides. And we see resistance to post and pre-emergent herbicides. So in the bottom left there, some photos, Poa plants which have been sprayed with glyphosate, and you can see one totally affected right next to ones which are completely unaffected. And then on the right, two Poa seedlings which have been pulled out of the soil, and one not affected by pre-emergent herbicide, nice long white roots, root hairs, so forth. The one on the right, obviously severely affected by the pre-emergent herbicide. Now I'm going to be talking about herbicides, but weed management needs to be an integrated approach. So there's quite a variety of programs, best management practices from agriculture, which highlight ways to manage weeds in various situations. In agriculture, horticulture, they've got more options than we do in turf. You know, they have crop rotation, they can have fallow periods, whereas in turf that becomes much more difficult because we've got a perennial crop there that's present all the time. But there are still other things we can do apart from herbicides, but I will be sort of concentrating on the herbicides. Now, a few years ago, I did a presentation at the AGCSA conference. It was actually a workshop where I presented some best management practices that I'd put together from those resources you saw on the previous slide and tweak them into sort of turf situations. Now, I'm not going to go through all this. As I said, it's a workshop situation. But yeah, there's quite a number of things there that you can come back and have a look at afterwards, or if you wanted this list, I'm happy to send it out again separately to you, so just get in touch with me. I will be sort of concentrating on number 4 and 5 there, talking about herbicides, talking about rotations, mixtures and so forth, as well as, you know, how to get the best out of our herbicides. And I won't go into the detail on any of those other points. That photo in the bottom right-hand corner, I grabbed that off Twitter in the last couple of weeks. Apologies, it hasn't been acknowledged where that came from. I just can't remember who put it up there. But yeah, just shows that if you get escapes, plants which you've missed with a broadacre situation, it's important to go back there, get those plants to make sure that they don't set seed, you know, which is point number 2 in that best management practice there, to make sure that we keep on top of any plants which do escape a more broad herbicide application. And one thing I want to emphasize is the long-term management of weeds comes down to managing the soil seed bank. We need to get that seed bank under control, get it as low as possible, especially for annual types of weeds like Poa. So what you can see here in this diagram, that square represents the soil seed bank, and that seed bank has withdrawals and deposits. So things come out of it and things go into it. So seeds die, they germinate and so forth. And then seeds are deposited into the bank from weeds, from the plants themselves as they set seed and they drop back into the soil, or they come in from external sources. So all efforts in terms of a long-term management strategy for weed control need to be to reduce that seed bank and make sure that there's minimising the deposits that are going in, but at the same time maximising withdrawals out of that, like a bank situation, I guess. So big table here. These are the currently registered herbicides and growth regulators in Australia for Poa. well, they're not all registered, but they are all being used. And as we know, in some states, you don't need to use registered products. So I'll go through this separately as the pre-emergent and post-emergent options and just make some comments, but obviously too big a job to go into everything in detail. If you want to copy this table, just let us know, or let the GTS guys know, and we can send out a copy of it. So the pre-emergent herbicides, in the past we've been largely relying on one group of herbicides. That's this group D mode of action, which includes the product you can see on the left here. So dipyperoxyl, pendimethalin, prodiamine, and propyzamide comes into that. That comes as a surprise to some people that propyzamide's in that same mode of action group. So yeah, we've relied on those a lot in the past. Now we are seeing some new mode of actions come in here, which you can see through there. Oxidizon's obviously been around for quite a while. The metallochlor products, there's a new mode of action for us, and indazoflam came out a few years ago, and we're just about to see a brand new mode of action, which falls into a totally new mode of action group in methoxyzoline, come available as well. So we are seeing some pre-emergent herbicides which we can get into some integrated programs, some different mode of actions of pre-emergent herbicides. Just a comment about pre-emergent herbicides. How do they actually work? So people have this idea, I guess, that the pre-emergent herbicides create a barrier in the soil through which the weeds can't come through. What actually happens is the herbicides absorb onto organic matter on the soil, in organic matter and soil particles in the soil, in the thatch, and from there they come into soil solution, and the weed seed that germinates takes up the herbicide out of that soil solution. So they don't actively pull it off the organic matter or the soil particle. It needs to come into soil solution for the plants to take it up. So in very dry soils, we can see herbicides which pre-emergent herbicides will not work. What this photo here shows is 5 petri dishes with soils at different moisture levels. And as you can see, the moisture level decreases in the bottom right-hand corner, and the pre-emergent herbicide isn't working. So all these plates have had weed seeds put into them. They've all been treated with a pre-emergent herbicide. But as the soil gets drier, there may still be enough moisture there for the weed seeds to germinate, but there may not be enough moisture for the pre-emergent herbicide to get in the soil solution and be taken up by the weed. So yeah, in extremely dry conditions, just keeping up that soil moisture level can certainly help with that performance of pre-emergent herbicides. Moving on to just having a quick look at the post-emergent herbicides. We've got this big group up the top, the group Bs, or the sulfonylureas, or we call them the ALS inhibitors. We've relied on those for Poa management, and at the start they worked fantastically, but unfortunately they were overused, and now we have resistance in a lot of cases. We've got some group Cs there. Of course, propyzamide has some post-emergent activity, and others. A couple of non-selectives there. So if your warm season turf goes into a very dormant situation, then they may be alternatives to use. And indazoflam has some post-activity, and a couple of group Zs at the end, which I've already mentioned. So a couple of things just to talk about post-emergent herbicides, things to get right. When we talk about resistance to a mode of action, it often applies to all the chemicals in that group, but we are seeing exceptions. So this is some work that has been done in Japan, obviously, and I'll just take you through it. So we've got 2 containers with soil and turf in them in each of the 4 photos. The Poa plants in the left-hand container are ones which are resistant to some sulfonylurea herbicides. The Poa plants in the right are a wild type which is not resistant to any herbicides. So in the bottom right-hand corner, untreated, no herbicides applied, both plants growing quite happily. In the top left-hand corner, top right-hand corner, sorry, we've got a sulfonylurea herbicide. We don't have it in Australia, but you can see the wild type, the one which doesn't have resistance, has been controlled, but the one which has resistance has been controlled. Hasn't been controlled, sorry. And similarly in the bottom left-hand corner, trifloxysulfuron, again, that wild type without resistance has been controlled, but the resistant biotype hasn't been controlled. When we go to the top left-hand corner, we've got 4-amsulfuron, which has got the same mode of action as the other two, but in this case, it has controlled that resistant biotype. So we do see differences in chemicals, and this occurs in fungicides as well, that in a particular mode of action group, some will control some resistant species, whereas others won't. And of course, overuse of any product will lead to it becoming resistant as well. But there are some subtle differences between chemicals in mode of action groups. Just some recent research, similar to what I talked about the pre-emergent herbicides. This is not Poa, it's crowsfoot grass, or goose grass as it's called in America, by Jim Brosnan at the University of Tennessee. And it's related to water content in the soil. So let's go in the bottom right hand corner, we've got various herbicides, which is not important, those herbicides, but it's the two groups of columns with the two water contents, soil water contents, which are sort of important. So the bottom, the sort of left hand group is soil with moisture content under 12%, and the right hand group of columns is soil with a higher moisture content greater than 20%. And the height of the columns represents percent control with a herbicide application. So the higher the soil moisture content, the better the control on these plants. And that's shown in those photographs, how the plants responded. So we've got identical plants, so no resistance issues. They're susceptible plants, but if the plants are under moisture stress, post-emergent herbicides do not perform as well. So again, some of the pre-emergent herbicides, having those plants healthy so they can take up the herbicide, translocate the herbicide, will ensure that we'll get the best out of our herbicides. Adjuvants, very important. Information's on the labels, but it's amazing how many times people fail to put an adjuvant in, even though the label may say it. So what this series of columns shows is ryegrass control. It's not Poa, but ryegrass control with a herbicide and different adjuvants. And as you add the adjuvants, which in this case are ammonium sulfate and a methylated seed oil. So as you increase those products and put them in together at certain rates, you get better control compared with having the product by itself without those adjuvants. So yeah, if the labels state that you should use an adjuvant, please make sure you do. And there may be some new adjuvants, and in this case, ammonium sulfate, so a bit of nitrogen can help with weed control in certain situations. So some of that information isn't always on the label. We're looking to keep our labels up to date, but things like this change quite quickly and new information becomes available, so it can take some time. So yeah, just be very aware of the importance of adjuvants in weed control. There's some information from North Carolina State University about using glyphosate in dormant couch grass. And the thing I wanted to highlight here was the water rates. Glyphosate is a product which has been designed to be used at quite low water rates. And if you ever look at the Australian labels, they also say this. So you see sort of 200 to 300 litres per hectare. There is a preferred water rate for glyphosate. And as water rates go up, performance can decrease with glyphosate. So if you're in a situation with dormant couch grass in the middle of winter and you're spraying glyphosate, try and get those water rates down or add some additional surfactant. And the water rate is due to the amount of surfactant that's in the formulations. So as you go higher with the water rate, you dilute the surfactant that's in the formulation and you decrease its effectiveness. So yeah, adhere to those low water rates which are on the label, or use some additional surfactant. And soil temperatures are important with sulfonylurea herbicides. So there's work again on with sulfonylurea herbicides on ryegrass control under cold weather. And yeah, once soil temperatures drop below 18 degrees, these sulfonylurea herbicides can perform quite poorly. So make sure the conditions are right for the herbicide. All right, so I mentioned that there's been some interesting paper put forward on POA, and these are the two researchers who put it together, Bert McCarthy and Fred Yelverton, and people would be fairly aware of Fred Yelverton. So what they've suggested is to not apply our pre-emergent herbicides in our usual period, which is late summer, early autumn, but to delay the application a bit later into mid-autumn. But to compensate for that, because by that stage the POA has germinated, is to put a mix out. Put the pre-emergent herbicide with at least 2 different post-emergent herbicides. I'll show you some examples in the next slide. And make sure those 2 post-emergent herbicides come from 2 different modes of action. And yeah, if possible, use non-selectives in dormant turf situations. And the following season, rotate all these herbicides to different modes of action. So we're talking about long-term management programs here, looking at what you do over several seasons. So it's quite a different approach, but this is really targeted at those POA plants which are now resistant to multiple modes of action. So there was a very interesting webinar ran in the last few months with all the turf researchers from the United States presenting their research results. So I just grabbed a couple of screenshots while I was listening to that webinar just to highlight what they're doing and what kind of programs they're suggesting. So if we just ignore the top 2 applications here, or top 2 programs, and concentrate on the 3rd and the 4th one, we can see herbicide programs with the products in the first column, and in the 3rd and the 4th program we've got 3 different herbicides. So we've got pre-emergent herbicide in each case, the first one being Spectacle and the second Barricade, and then we've got two post-emergent herbicides in the tank, Princep, which is simazine, and then Tribute Total, which is an ALS inhibitor. And with Monument, with Barricade, we've got Monument, which is an ALS inhibitor again, and again, simazine Princep. So this is the program that they're suggesting, a pre-emergent, 2 post-emergents, and the 2 post-emergents have different modes of action. And you can look at the right-hand column at the timing. They would normally put their pre-emergent herbicides out in, say, September, as the top product in that table would be through pre-emergent herbicide. But these mixes of 3 products have been put out in November. So delaying that application until you've had germination, you've had emergence, and you've got young POA plants So that's the strategy that they're evaluating, and as the title here says, these are the top performing products in this particular trial. So this is University of Tennessee, and that's Jim Brosnan in the bottom right hand corner there. And a different researcher. So this is in Mississippi, what we can see here are a whole heap of different programs down the left-hand side, and I haven't got time to explain them all. But again, you can see that there are similar product mixes to the previous slide. The bars on the right-hand side show level of control. So again, we've got pre-emergent herbicides and two post-emergent herbicides together, and they are showing the best levels of control. So it's something that we've got some trials out here in Australia at the moment, and we'll be sort of looking at this a lot more next year. And I'll just come to sort of the end of this part with a few minutes to go, just to talk about mixtures versus rotation, and to highlight why mixtures are better than just rotating herbicides. So this is a paper that I found an agricultural situation where we're looking to control a broadleaf weed. And we've got 6 different herbicide programs here. And these programs were run over 4 years. So the first program, and we've got 2 different herbicides. We've got the ALS inhibitor, or the sulfonylurea, and we've got a phenoxy herbicide. So remember, we're looking at broadleaf weed control. So in the first program, every year a phenoxy herbicide was applied. There was no ALS herbicides applied. In the second program, out of those 4 years, in 1 year there was an ALS, and in the other 3 there was a phenoxy herbicide applied. In the third program, in 2 years there was an ALS, and in the other 2 years there was a phenoxy applied. And in the next program, 3 years out of the 4, an ALS was applied, and 1 year there was a phenoxy. And the second last program, every year ALS herbicide was applied and no phenoxies. And that last program was a mixture of both applied every year. So 4 years in a row, a mixture applied. And then what they did, they looked at the seeds in the soil and saw what percentage of the seeds were resistant to ALS herbicides. So the first program, where no ALS herbicides were applied, very little resistant. The natural level of resistance to ALS herbicides, only 4%. As you increase the amount of ALS herbicides in the program, you got more and more resistance. By the time you applied it 4 years in a row, 85% of that soil seed bank was resistant to ALS herbicides. Now look at the mixture on the bottom. Every year you applied a mixture, only 8% of that seed bank was resistant to ALS herbicides. So those programs through the middle, which are rotations, so you're rotating from 1 year to the next, while in some cases there was less resistance, once you put that mixture out, you significantly reduced levels of resistance in that soil seed bank. So mixtures are much, much better than rotations. All right, I'll wrap up with just a couple of slides on herbicide resistance testing, and then we'll have a look and see if there's any questions. So as I said, you can send plants away. There are various people who do this type of work. So one of them is an organisation called Plant Science Consulting, and you can see their website there on the bottom of the screen, and all the details are on the website about how to submit samples. But essentially, you pull out cores. So if you're in a green situation, shallow cores, you only need them sort of 3 centimetres high of poa plants. If you're in a fairway, sports field, other situation, you can pull out individual plants or take larger cores. Then send them away as detailed on the website. And what they do is they grow those plants out, They separate them into individual seedlings, plant those seedlings in trays so that you do get replicates. So not only, it's not just spraying one plant, but a large number of plants are sprayed. And that's Dr. Peter Boutsalis there with his equipment in the laboratory where they do the spraying, and then they get the results in the bottom left-hand corner. So you can see, what happens. You've got a tray there which has all been sprayed with herbicides, and only some of them are resistant, and others some have been killed, and others haven't been affected by the herbicide. So obviously some herbicide resistance. So he'll request information on what herbicides you've been using and that kind of thing. But all that information is on the website. So Plant Science Consulting is one. I'm not sure in Western Australia, the University of Western Australia may offer this service for anyone over there. In New South Wales, Department of Primary Industries of Wagga do this type of work as well. So there are a couple of options, but it is a straightforward process, and you'll find the costing and all that kind of information on the website. So just some resources if people want to have a look. There's a lot of research being done in Australia on herbicide resistance. It's focused at the University of Western Australia. Check Crop Life Australia, so new resistance management strategies, especially for turf fungicides, have just been released. And if anyone's looking for information, some more education, I highly recommend these Weed Smart webinars. They've been recorded, they're on their website. They're agriculture focused, but there's some really good information for post and pre-emergent herbicides, and you can do several of them over a number of days. It's some really good information, and they're continually being updated. So it's a great resource as well. So with that, there's my email address. If anyone's got any questions they want to send to me afterwards, and if they want any of the tables or slides from this. All right. Let's have a look at some questions. What's the benefit of delaying the pre-emergent herbicide application? Why do we want some POA emergence first? Yeah, it's as I understand it, it's to make sure that we don't run out of pre-emergence towards the end of the season, because we know the POA does have a wide window of germination. So get those POA plants up. When they're young, they're much easier to kill than trying to kill large POA plants when we come into July, August, or later actually, probably August, September, October. We get that majority of germination in that autumn period. We can control those more easily with post-emergent herbicides. And some of the pre-emergent herbicides also have some post-activity if the plants are small enough. There's root pruning and that kind of thing which happens. So we can control that and get extended control from our program running right to the end of the season. And we're seeing POA germinate for extremely wide window, and in the southern states it's literally all year round now. What was the percentage of active ingredient in the glyphosate trials? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was a 360 gram per litre glyphosate. Yeah, so there are 450s, 540s, 720s. There's a whole heap of different ones. And obviously, as you put in more active ingredient, you put in less surfactant in the formulation. So it's something to be mindful that you might need some surfactant, adjuvant as you go into those high concentrated formulations. All right, so I think that's the questions answered. Again, thanks to Greenway, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'll hand up back over to Paul.
Thanks, Jyri. Yeah, appreciate that. There was some good information there, nice and short and succinct. I think the main take-home points for me was obviously rotate your mode of actions. Everyone knows that. You've probably heard that 1,000 times, but I think something slightly different there was Jyri talking about not just using one product and one mode of action, and then next season or next application another product, another mode of action. It's about doing mixes. So yeah, mixing post and pre-emergence together, and mixing your mode of actions that way. So I think that was one key point. Using an adjuvant was another key point. We have one called Oro Turf, which has been out for a couple of years now, proven to be really successful at making Poa herbicides seem to be more effective and getting really good results for that. So an adjuvant's important in getting the water rate right as well, just making sure we're getting that. So I think it was a key take-home points. So thanks to Jyri again. As mentioned in the introduction, we're going to have a little break just until probably the back end of July, where we'll come with another session. I think it's going to be really interesting. We're going to get a speaker, hopefully from the US, and he's going to talk about bent grasses, the history of the development of bent grasses, where we're at now with the super bents, how the new bents, these super bents, are affecting how we manage bent grass, and what sort of putting surfaces are they producing compared to some of the older varieties. So I think that'll be quite interesting. And then in August, we'll probably bring some of the northern guys, warm season guys, back into it a bit more. We're going to look at ERI, fungi preventative controls, as well as fairy ring preventative as well. We've been having a lot of success over the last few years with a couple of programs, especially with the fairy ring. So I think that'll be quite interesting. So I look forward to seeing everyone then. Appreciate everyone's time. I'll send the emails out in mid-July, and look out for it then, and talk to you all soon. Appreciate your company once again.